Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, with this committee's, I'd say the chairman, I compliment him on the quality of people coming forth. My gosh, we had the very best minds, and Kissinger yesterday, Bob Gates, the four of you. And I have to say this about your opening statements. Confession is good for the soul, I guess. And this is the first time I've ever started reading opening statements, and I couldn't put them down. It was like a scary but true novel. And and I appreciate the straightforwardness in which you've done this. It's very clear, I think, to me, and I won't ask you. Well, I will ask you to respond. We're in a weakened condition right now that we have not been in relative to the threat that's out there, at least in the 20 years plus that I've been here. When you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff talking about how the risk is so great and we're so unready that it would be immoral to use force, you have the vice chairman saying that for the first time in my career, we could be met with a crisis and we'd have to say we cannot. And so these things are going on now, and I really believe it's true. I like one of the quotes, many of the quotes of President Reagan. One of them is, "None of the four wars in my lifetime came about because we are too strong. It's weakness that invites adventurous adversaries to make mistaken judgments." Going across from you, Professor Cohen, do you agree with that statement?
I certainly would. The only thing, though, I would say, unfortunately, is, President Reagan did an extraordinary job presiding over a major defense buildup and very clearly and powerfully articulating American values. And the upshot was
strength.
Right.
Yeah.
The one caution I would add is, although I'm very much of the view that we need some major plus-ups in the defense budget, and I am very much in favor of presidents articulating American values, we're not going to have something like the Reagan recovery.
Very good. Thank you very much. I won't ask for the rest of you on that. Professor Mead, you wrote in back in 2013, I mentioned this to you before, that Putin and Khomeini believe, and the quote was, "They are dealing with a dithering and indecisive American leader." Now, that's 2 years ago. Do you still think they believe that? Is that still true today?
Senator, I'm afraid they do believe that.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a factor in some of the risks they've been willing to run.
Well, I think so, too. Dr. Kissinger, when he was here, he said the role of the United States is indispensable. In a time of global upheaval, the consequences of American disengagement magnifies and requires larger intervention later. And Professor Mead, I think, aren't you saying about the same thing in your statement when you said America is the secret ingredient that keeps this historically contentious, rivalry-ridden area full of states of differing size, capacity, with different attitudes toward economics, defense, social organizations, and much less working together? Isn't that essentially what you're agreeing with, Dr. Kissinger?
I am agreeing with Dr. Kissinger. I think if we look back at the 20th century, sir, we can see that even if we look at times when the United States intervened and perhaps it was unwise and the results weren't successful, overall far more people die, far more damage is done when the United States evades responsibility than when it moves forward.
And thank you also for bringing up in your statement and restating it verbally when you talk about one of the United States' greatest advantages is our exceptional array of natural resources. You go on and talk about our shale revolution, the things that we're in the middle of right now, and horizontal fracturing, hydraulic fracturing and horizontal well drilling. By the way, the first hydraulic fracturing was 1948 in my state of Oklahoma. You probably knew that. But with that being significant, and then you end up that statement by saying, do we sell LNG abroad? Do we end the ban on crude oil exports? I say resoundingly yes, because we want to keep this thing going. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir. I think it's good national economic policy and good strategic policy.
Well, thank you very much. Professor Mahnken, my time is running out here. You talked about sharpening the trade-off between guns and butter. I like that statement. I like the way you're saying that, because that's exactly what we're doing right now with sequestration. Yesterday, when Gates was in here, he talked about in 1961, the budget consumed, defense consumed 51% of the budget in 1961. Today it's 15. Now, when we try to do something about sequestration, there's a demand by this administration that you're not going to be able to put one more nickel back into defense unless you also put it into the social programs. So I'd ask each one of you the question, do you think we have too much butter and not enough guns? Let's start with you, Professor Mahnken.
I think, you know, one of the core duties of the government is to provide for the common defense. Nobody else can do that.
That's what the Constitution says. Yes.
Yep. And so I think national security spending is key. Now we can try to get more, you know, bang for our buck, and we can do that also on the butter side as well through reform.
Understand.
But it's an inescapable responsibility of the U.S. government to defend the United States and its people.
Professor Cohen.
I don't know whether or not we're spending the right amount of money on butter, but I'm quite sure we're not spending enough on guns.
Very good. Good way of putting it. Professor Mead.
I think Professor Cohen had it exactly right, sir.
Good. Dr. Hicks.
I agree with that. Dr. Gates also had a saying he liked to use both here on the Hill and also with his staff, which is we're a rich nation, we're a capable nation. We should be able to provide for the common defense at the same time we're providing for the citizens' needs at home.
Thank all four of you.